This is not about money, nor is it about fame. Just watching the blood moon rising, a new change again. This is not about pressure, nor is it about shame. This is about taking a fall and no one wants to play. I'll be fine. You'll be fine. I'll be fine. And we're together.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome to a very special UA Live. Today, this is a bit of a follow up episode, but it's a follow up in the best way because it means that we're launching a brand new Luna session by the band Moon Taxi. If you guys may remember, a couple months ago, we launched the API Vision Console Emulation built into Luna's mixer, and to help showcase that, we asked Jacquire King and the band to go into the studio and put it to the test and record a song 100% live in the studio using the API Vision console as the bones to build the sonic footprint off of. So now Jacquire has gone off. Him and Spencer finished the production. Jacquire worked on the mix. It's been mastered. It just released on streaming everywhere last week, and now today it's available inside of Luna for you guys to download to be able to open up on your own system, be able to explore the tracks, save a new version, create your own mix. These are insanely well recorded and fantastically produced tracks for you guys to get your little hands on, which I can tell you guys already, having had the session for a couple of weeks, it's a lot of fun to dig in here. There's a lot to learn, and who better to learn all these tricks from than the man himself, Mr. Jacquire King. How you doing, man?
I'm great, Ben. I'm
Dude,
very good to see you,
good to see you
as
as
always.
well, man.
As
This is
always.
this is this has been a fun one. This is I love doing this sort of content with you, man. Like it gets to combine all of our favorite things, right? Like making good music, good people, and then being able to showcase some of the coolest and newest stuff inside of Luna all at the same time.
Absolutely. It's what we do every day, man. It's good stuff.
Hell yeah. Well, for people at home, hopefully, just gonna assume everyone is checking this out. Hopefully, you guys have already seen the tracking session, and if not, make sure you go back and watch that because there's a lot to learn there about the tracking process. But I figure that maybe a good place to start here would be, kind of talking about what happens in both for this song and just broadly after you're in the studio with the band. You've cut the tracks, you've got everything to you. What are the next steps in the process that really kind of help you polish up a production?
Um, well, that's a good question. Well, it's perspective is important.
Mm-hmm.
I did take the opportunity. I mean, I like to work fast. I like to be prepared to work fast. We worked fast in the studio. Everybody was prepared. We did a really excellent job. And it came out well, the tracking session. A little bit of time away,
Mm-hmm.
and then just being conscious that always with a recording, because doubt, self-doubt and perception, and you sort of think about other things sort of creep in. So just keeping the mindset that uh, everybody was super stoked on what we did.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not, you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. It's like what things need attention. It's making sure. Uh, well, there was vocals to be comped.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that edits are clean, kind of like putting it under the microscope a little bit more,
Yeah.
um, and just yeah, just deciding what things needed a little bit more editing, maybe a little bit more attention, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of keeping in mind that, hey, it felt good, so let's not try to dig too deep. Uh, so I took a few days away from it, and then I guess the following week I made vocal comps
Mm-hmm.
of Trevor's. The lead vocals. We had done everything that we needed with Amber the day of the session.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was a little bit more consideration given to some of the way the programming had been arranged.
Okay. You mean like the
Um,
percussion or the
yeah,
synthesizers?
yeah. No, mostly the
Mm-hmm.
percussion, and so it wasn't anything dramatic, but I think that there was a section or two where something was taken out that had been
Mm-hmm.
in there just to kind of um, provide more dynamic lift and a little bit more shape and difference between sections. And we added a few more small elements to just kind of bolster things. And while I was doing the vocal comp, um, well, actually, after did the vocal comp, I sent it over to Spencer so that he could check it out
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that the band was signed off on the vocal comp that I had made, and that was okayed. And he took the kick and snare tracks from the drum kit and exported those files into Logic to add kick and snare samples. And the reason he added them is because he'd produced and made their album that is out, that this is sort of a companion to, and just wanted to be very sure that the sound choice of those samples was, congruent with the texture of what they had been doing most recently.
Yeah.
So just not a lot of stuff, making a better rough mix, getting a mix that felt more towards where I was headed. I started to kind of to add in some of that mixing architecture before I sent him the Luna session.
So like kind of doing the groups and starting to some of the subgroups and the master, like the mix bus stuff. Is that kind of what you focused on?
Yeah. And I typically like to kind of do that stuff at a little bit as I'm editing, because it's good to kind of switch gears, and not place all of some of the sort of, the desire I have for the sound to feel more finished all on an editing process.
Yeah.
It's not only is it a little bit of a way to create perspective for myself, and switch what my mind is focused on, but it's just like it just kind of keeps everything moving along. And a good mix can massage over some things, kind of puts things in a better place and better perspective. So
yeah, sometimes it reveals like things that obviously need more work, and sometimes it's like, actually this is good already as it is, now that sonically it's sitting where you kind of mean it to.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that was kind of revealed in that process was a little bit of the conga track take that was in the bridge just needed a little bit more editing.
Got it. Well, I think maybe a good place to start. I want to dive through the session, and we'll give people some of the highlights, some things to check out. But I think maybe a great place to start is let's listen down, from the top, through like the second verse or so. Give people an idea of where this mix ended up, and as we're doing that, I'll scroll around the session and give people a little bit of an overview of what all's in here. But this way, everybody, we can all be kind of hearing the same thing as we break this down. So here's a song, Mission by the band Moon Taxi, mixed by Jacquire King.
Track mind, high school design for perfection. Gonna raise the question.
I'm hearing like a lot of filtering. Maybe it's just my feed.
Sorry, what were you saying, Jacquire?
I was hearing like some. Are your speakers on or anything?
No, there shouldn't be. I wonder. Hopefully, it's not bleeding through my headphones too much. Was it like phasey weird?
Yeah. Sorry.
That's all good. It was sounding good on my side.
I was just wondering if it's my feed. That's okay. Gotcha. That's all.
Hopefully, yeah. Hit us in the comments, guys, if it's sounding weird to you guys too. But I got an easy question for us to answer here real quick. Scott's asking, where do I download the session? Excellent question, Scott. So hit your UA diamond inside Luna, go to the Discover tab, and then over here on the right-hand side, or depending on the size of your screen, it might be down below these blocks here. You'll see the section called Luna Sessions. So here, Mission by Moon Taxi. Click download. Just make sure read the agreement. Don't post this as your own work. Do anything silly with it. Agree and download, and it'll download the zip file for you guys to check out. And of course, while you're over here, you can check out there's other amazing Luna sessions, including the Side Hustle by K Club that we did together, Jacquire, and remember way back in the day when we did that Cass McComb session before Luna was even out in the world.
Yes, sir. And you've actually got a couple sessions in there yourself, don't you?
Yep, I've got one. I've got one with Greaves that we did Saturation that I mixed, and the Fab's got one in here with Louis Cato. We've got the Cold War Kids, the song that was in the API Vision trailer.
Yeah, I enjoyed your watching that interview with that. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the Discover tab, guys. This is where you can find all sorts of amazing material to pop open here inside of Luna. And so yeah, as you guys saw, there's, I mean, it's not a huge session, but this is not small either. This is a fairly moderate to big size production, I'd say, right?
Yeah, I would say it's. I mean, for me these days, it's definitely a little bit. Yeah, it's on the large medium size, I guess, medium to large size. Yeah.
Right. Well, and so, I think maybe a cool place to start, would be talking about how API Vision kind of worked for you on this, because like I mentioned during the tracking session, we got to kind of see your screen a couple of times and learn a little bit about the processing that you were doing. So you were building some of these API settings, the EQ, the compressor, etc. Some of those you were building in real time, but then when you get to the mixing side, this is the thing I'm enjoying the most about using console emulation, is like this stuff just kind of transfers over, and it goes from being DSP powered to being natively powered. So even a moderately big size session like this, you'll see like API is basically on every track. That's kind of like your default, your go-to sound, I guess, for each one of these tracks.
Yeah, it's definitely the color. It's the definitely the predominant color. We are. I mean, I am using a decent amount of actual like engaged process, but as you can see, there's tons of EQs that aren't engaged as well.
Yeah.
I would say maybe half of it I kind of started to do when we were tracking and I was listening to playback. But then I probably left 70% of that as is, at least, and then just kind of like started engaging more and adding more. But it's wonderful having it there for like the color of the API and the sort of the saturation you get, just the quality of it, the sonic imprint that it has. But sometimes that's just enough. You don't actually have to like turn things on and use it just because it's there. It just is it's part of the gain structure and color of the session and the console.
Yeah. Well, it's rad too. This is one of those things that I always remember back to our first session working on Cass McCombs of like, API, like I mentioned, there's some magic there that's happening that allows you to use it in real time and be processing it on your Apollo's DSP. And then when you switch over, when you're done recording, now it offloads from the DSP and becomes a native process. But one of the other things that gets added in really quickly there is the tape machines. So now, notice you're using the same machine across almost all the tracks. You've got a Studer A800 on here using it looks like it's I know everyone's going to ask, what settings did he use? You got the GP9 30 IPS and the 7.5. So this is another one of those things, like the minute you kick this on, right, you're instantly getting a slightly different sound or slightly more polished reflection of what you just recorded.
Yeah, I mean 100%. And it's amazing because, and I typically, in terms of like the tracks themselves, I pretty typically choose the same setting for everything. Now, I do get into using the ATR 102 on some busing. And then we can look at that, in a bit. But there, I'm typically choosing different tape formulas, different tape widths, speeds to tailor it to the job I'm specifically trying to do at that point on some busing. But yeah, I typically stick with one tape setup on the Studer across the board. And, it comes up, I don't remember I don't really remember what we were doing in the session day of tracking. I know it comes up as 456 is the default at 15 IPS plus sticks. I don't remember I don't recall at the moment if I switched it.
Well, on the looks like on the drums, yeah, it's 468 15 and 1-inch head.
Yeah.
And then further down the session, you've got some on like the vocals. Again, yeah, a 250 at 15 and a 1/4 inch, and a GP9 15 1/4 inch.
Yeah. 1/4 inch on vocals just seems to really, I mean, because it really brings up, just because of the quality of 1/4 inch tape, like just everything that kind of sonically implies, especially on vocals, it kind of helps really shape the mid range, alleviate the bottom. It keeps the bottom, but the way that it kind of like folds it in and compresses it and just tidies things up. But 1/4 inch is often a great thing on vocal buses. We can, but I'll play with the different tape speeds, different tape formulas, elevation, to try to find something that adds that extra, the extra nuance of character and polish to the whole thing. And like I said, I kind of stick to one selection on the Studer, and just kind of go from there. We can also see that I use the noise feature on the Studer. I don't typically use it on the busing.
Okay.
So I don't, but there's an automation lane for turning the noise on and off in the automation pads. And so in part of our process of mix prep is we go through and we turn the noise on and off for when the audio's present. So so that we get that character of sound, because to my ear, adding the noise into the emulation of the tape is pretty essential in terms of like depth and character and it feeling like what tape really feels like. So it's kind of a nice thing, but it does, especially across this many tracks, it has a real big cumulative effect.
Yeah.
And actually when audio is passing through the tape machine, it changes the noise floor reaction and the way that it's, not only does the audio mask it, but it pushes the noise floor down because of just the way a tape machine, works, the way that whole process works. So.
And it's really, you brought up such a good point, because I think this is something that was added. It wasn't right at the launch of Luna, but a little bit after, where they added in the automation for noise. This way, on track by track basis, you can say noise on, noise off, and you might be able to pick up at this if you're listening on headphones. Like when my cursor's here on the chorus, you can see it over here on my meters. Like the noise floor is up there, but when I click back to the intro, magically we've got no noise. And I mean, noise was it was an inherent thing that every machine had, right? Like this is it's not like a gimmick or a thing that they added for some special effect.
It's something that was battled. I mean, that's why Dolby created noise reduction.
Yeah.
A process that an additional piece of hardware that that the signal had to go through to be encoded onto the tape and then de-encoded off the tape to reduce the noise floor. But with the change in technology and what we're used to listening to, I mean, DAWs don't inherently have a noise floor. So we've gotten away from, but at the same time, that's one of the things that feels kind of comforting to the ear, is having that noise in there as well, and as we've gotten away from predominant recording and listening to things on things that have noise floors, yes, it's kind of essential that we be able to manage it, and because we don't want it in the quiet parts of the song, or we don't want a bunch of noise before the actual music starts. So
yeah, that's every time I've ever gotten notes back from clients about noise, it's always been the top or the tail of the song, where they're like, I'm hearing a lot, like it makes sense, right? Of course that's the obvious place where you could hear that there's noise, but that always, sometimes it makes artists or musicians a little paranoid of like, dude, where'd all that noise come from? Like, did we mess something up? Like, they get a little bit worried that it was their fault. You're like, oh no, don't worry about it. Like, I can automate that. I can automate our way around this.
Yep.
So again, some great questions here from folks in the chat. And if you guys if you have questions for Jacquire, this is literally the perfect time to be asking them. So, quick one. Some people are noticing I've got the session pulled up here, and my system is running at 44.1. Do you remember? Did we track this at 44, or were you tracking at a higher sample rate on the day?
The session was at 48.
At 48, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things that you get spoiled with Luna, right? Like sample rates, it doesn't care what sample rate you work at or what it was recorded in. It automatically handles all that stuff in the background. So I'm able to open up Jacquire's 48 session at 44.1, and I could put it back up to 48. It would just reload the session and listen back. We'd be listening to those files. The way that sample rate conversion happens inside of Luna has been, it's just something I don't. That and saving. I was talking to somebody about Luna like a week or two ago, and I was like, "Oh yeah, dude, remember like back in the day, like that was one of the big things we were talking about all the time. It's just something that has become accepted now, right? Everything is always saved. And none of us have lost big chunks of work.
We do save versions all the time, just so that we have a chronological document and can revert to things if we want,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many things being taken care of for us now. It's pretty amazing. It is really incredible the way that Luna is agnostic about sample rates, and allows you to work with files that are in multiple sample rates, or like if you want to print this, mix at 96. Even though the source tracks are 48, you can run your session at 96, and basically what you're getting there is you're just getting, you're getting the fidelity of the plugins and the whole architecture running at the higher sample rate, and it will print your stereo mix, your file at the higher sample rate. So you're kind of like, you're able to upsample, or, it's just pretty awesome. But
Yeah.
It is something to be aware of, because you can create problems for yourself. I mean, if you're not paying attention, because it doesn't tell you that. It doesn't tell you, in a way. It doesn't tell you that. It's good that someone noticed that. But
well, and so Bo's asking, like, do you usually track at 48, and why not be tracking at 88 or 96 for future proofing a session?
That's a fair question. Just 48 has always sort of felt like enough to me. I have, in cases where I have, where I'm going to, and this has been a number of years now, but where I was going to be going, like recording to tape, going into the computer, making some edits and putting it back on tape, then I would definitely use the higher sample rates. Okay. Because I'm getting a generational loss. So I'm trying to return as much fidelity as possible to the tape. But to be honest, I think higher sample rates are obviously a good thing, but there's also some things about it that analog equipment doesn't like as much. Now I realize we're completely in the box here. This was done completely in the box, recorded and mixed, without the use of anything analog other than microphones.
Yeah. Well, that was you answered somebody else's question where they're asking what pre's and if it was all in the box. So yeah, this was all Apollo mic pre's and in the box work.
When you download this session, if you arm the tracks, it will open up the record lanes, and you will be able to see. Like, that's another really powerful thing about Luna, is that it maintains all of the the data, plugins, and work in the process. So if you arm these tracks, it'll pull back up what I used and how I used it.
Which is so I just reactivated the Kick 421 track here. I told it to use one of my microphone inputs. It's important to kind of match a mic input to a mic input. Otherwise, some things like the unison unison preamp doesn't necessarily come back up if you pull up a line input instead.
Yeah, totally.
But you can see here, this is Jacquire's recording chain for the kick. So there's processing on the way in, the API preamp and the unison slot to give it, the really mimic all the character of that preamp, and then it's going into the 560 where you've cut some of that. What was that, like 400 or it's 40, and then it boosted some 50. Why does it say 0.04? That's supposed to be 0.4, I believe. 400 and
I think you discovered something that
it's an Easter
needs to
egg.
be changed
A bit of an
on the
Easter egg
graphic
there. I know, right? I never noticed that
because
before.
it should be 0.4, not 0.04.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
You know, but
minus,
my eyes aren't good. My eyes aren't good enough.
I love it. So yeah, you've done some mid and low EQ here. You've got the Harrison again going in there and doing a big cut in the low mids and a boost in the bottom and a little bit upper there on the mids. Like, but dude, this is so rad. Like, you guys, you're not just getting to see Jacquire's mix session when you download this. You're gonna be able to see the tracking session and find. That's rad, right?
Well, it's one of the things that's one of the aspects of doing these with you that I love so much, and I mean that we can deliver the session to folks to check out. But they get the whole. I mean, in Luna, this is the only platform where you can kind of get this much forensic evidence, of like what happened,
Yep.
I mean, obviously, it doesn't give you the mic placement and some of that, and some of the choice, unless it's documented. It doesn't give you all that, but it definitely gives you a lot, which is super super cool. And it's nice, it's nice. I mean, we use that feature all the time. In that, it's like because I have recurring sessions with a group of folks, and it's just like we're able to fast track the session setup. Now, obviously, it's situational and we change it because it's like day to day, genre, song, what, it's a little bit different, but just having, that kick path, with the gain set up in a starter EQ, it's like you're getting a fast start, getting a fast start on things.
Huge head start. Yeah.
Huge. It's awesome. Now, there is the danger in becoming, lazy and complacent and not spending the time that maybe you should in some cases,
or not turning your ears off, right? Just putting too much trust in your presets or your session templates, right? Like, sometimes it can cause your ears to just turn off and not necessarily critically listen or think, like, right? Because I assume you do this, Jacquire, right? From song to song, even if you're using everything exactly the same, there might be something different about the tone of the song or the energy that you're going for in that production that you do need to go in there and tweak right away.
100%. Like, even if it's the same, same drummer, same drums, same, the way that the drum kit fits with the key of the song, the tempo, how hard they're playing, what they're playing, like, are there more cymbals, less cymbals? It's like, there's just so many things. Yeah, it's like you have to chase the nuance and make sure that it all fits together. So you are constantly adjusting.
Yeah.
You get closer, and the adjustments are probably a lot smaller once you kind of get in the sweet spot, but you still have to pay attention to it and work for it.
Yeah. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the Vision channel strip specifically, and how, if you have any tips or tricks for folks who are maybe newer to using API just in general. What's kind of how would you teach someone to use the API Vision and really get the most out of it, if they'd never touched it before?
I saw a comment from Colton pop up. Hey, what's up, buddy? And so I apologize, Ben. I was looking at that and I missed the first part of your question. So could you hit me with the guy?
I saw Colton. For everyone who doesn't know, Colton, he was with us for the Cast McCombs, longtime friend and assistant here for Jacquire. I had to give him the shout out.
Nice.
So if someone is brand new to using API Vision consoles, using APIs just in general, do you have some tips and tricks for getting people to start and getting good sounds out of the API, and kind of finding their just getting their bearings for how to use this, because it's there's a lot going on in here, so it might help to break it down for folks a little bit.
There is, and I think you can put this stuff in the record path, but a real beauty in the way that it's set up and the way that it manages going from DSP to native is a lot of the stuff is just sort of on the back end, the playback. So really focus on getting uh, a good record level, and make sure your polarities are in agreement. Get good gain structure with your pre, and kind of commit to that. And as and then as you learn to use the rest of it kind of on playback, then you can kind of work towards maybe being more committed to the record path. And I sort of like the difference between the two EQs, the 550 and the 560,
Mm-hmm.
is I generally view the 550 as a little bit more of a tracking EQ because the amplitude changes are in 2 dB increments.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more of aggressive maybe.
It's a big
There's
brush,
more
right?
there's more change. There's more
Yeah.
change. So you kind of like, I'm more apt to carve harder on the way in and shape things, and then kind of tend to rely a little bit more on the 560 for mixing type of EQ moves where it's a little bit more subtlety.
Mm-hmm.
The tonality of both EQs is different a little bit.
Yep.
So there's a color change there. Just sort of slowly make yourself aware of things.
Well, so I feel like before I was really using the Vision Console Emulation here inside of Luna, I kind of slept on the 560 like that. It was same vibe about the 550, right? I would pull that one out to like do some broad strokes, or if for mid-range character, for a top like a lift or push, like it seems to be really good at that. But yeah, the 560, it has a very different smoothness, but it's also it can do some amazing surgery on stuff, right? It's like the mid-range character that you can pull in and out. It's a whole different level.
Absolutely. And I mean, and people shouldn't feel like, well, there's not as many EQ points. It's very musical.
Yeah.
It's very musical, and it can be used in combination with other EQs. But it does not have any shelf features. So like if you're needing, especially in the mixing, if you are needing like a high frequency shelf boost, you're going to have to use the 550.
Yeah.
But like, whereas, you can use the 550 to kind of like dump off some low end. You can use the filter set for that right there over to the left. Yeah.
These are so handy. And like, this is another one that I think people maybe sleep on, right? Like, of course, a lot of us are high pass freaks or whatever, but also this having low pass and stuff. I didn't realize how much of a lifesaver it is to low pass some things every once in a while.
Absolutely. I mean, even like on some tracks that not this particular song, but some tracks I've been mixing recently and using this console emulation, where I've had some pretty aggressive cymbal wash.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like closing down that low pass filter, closing it down to like 10 or 12K, but then also working a high like a high frequency shelf in conjunction with it. So kind of like in the same way that you might use a Pultec, like kind of dump off some of the top end with that low pass, and then kind of shape it, bring it back up in the area that you want it to kind of be present, to sort of work them against each other. Yeah, that I don't know exactly what the slope is on that low pass, but it's very gentle, very forgiving, and it's certainly not as brutal. I mean, I wouldn't even call the bottom of the high pass brutal, but it's definitely steeper than the low pass.
Yeah.
So it can be very useful and kind of create some very sweet sounds, and take some like edge off some things, and then you can kind of be more specific with what you maybe turn back up. Like, like if you've got really harsh cymbals, dump the low pass down to like 8 or 10K, and then go follow it up with the 560 and kind of push back a little bit of 8K or or something like that.
And that, again, guys, there's no rules to this stuff, right? Like the numbers aren't ultimately what matters. It's kind of like, is it giving you the shape of the sound that you want? So like, yeah, if that top end is bothering you, there's 10 different ways you could approach shaping that top end. But like Jacquire, I'm doing the same thing as what Jacquire's talking about here, of like coming in and using that low pass just to chill out the top, to just bring it down, soften up the highs, but then sometimes you're like, man, now I'm just like missing a little bit of definition. So sometimes, come back in here at like 5K or 7K and like add a little bit back. And the interaction between these filters, it can create a thing that you couldn't do with just one or the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can create, I mean, yeah, you can dump that. Yeah, you can create focus around 7K of a boost without, having to hear all the stuff above it just kind of like out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Some other things about, the compressor. This compressor circuit is super useful. The set of controls is pretty comprehensive, just in the speed adjustments, and so forth. But it is very, I mean, you have to keep in mind that it is a very, like the resolution and display of the metering of the compression is, it's small format, so it's not super detail.
Mm-hmm.
You need to, like, when you start to see compression, you're definitely way
compressing.
you're definitely into compression. So, learn to use it and kind of like, maybe as you're learning to use it and kind of getting a feel for it, lower the threshold till you start to see the light ticking over, and then back it off,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're just like, oh yeah, I am definitely compressing, back it off a little bit, and the light will go out, and it's like, and then, even raise the threshold more, and you'll start to be able to better hear the onset of compression and how it's working.
Mm-hmm.
Super useful tool. I've been liking this particular compressor on drums
Yeah.
a lot, especially snare drum, a little bit on overheads. It depends sometimes on the overheads, but it's been really useful on a snare. As you can see, I mean, I almost always track with a distressor on the snare drum, and it's probably
Mm-hmm.
in the record path here, but then I also like to compress a snare drum in mix a little bit. So,
So let's see.
but
Snare SM7. And this one looks like you just had the API preamp on it without the distressor going to tape.
okay.
But you can definitely see down here in the vision your compressor settings. So here we've
Okay,
got,
so I tracked with it, and yeah, well, okay, so it's yeah. Well, no, I don't know. Oh, I guess maybe. Well, I actually don't remember clearly. I might have had that on during tracking to hear the compression, but I didn't commit it to tape.
got it. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah.
Well, and man, I totally agree with you. Of like the way this compressor works, I love that there's kind of multiple ways to get to compress a lot, but then also ease up on it, right? So like, obviously you can roll the threshold back, but the other one that I'm a huge fan of is having the fully variable ratio here. So
Yes.
if you're like, man, this is just about it, but it feels like it's acting a little too much, a little too, just roll the ratio back a little bit, and that can have the same effect as kind of, it's not lifting the threshold, it's keeping the threshold where it is, but it's just making the slope and the activity of that compression a little gentler, a little bit easier. And you've got the knee control, so you can go between hard and soft. The type, the new and old, changes the feedback circuit. Again, all these, they're changing how this compressor is reacting to the sound, and that in turn changes the tone. It changes what you end up feeling coming back out through the mix. And I'm sure I think we've talked about this before, Jacquire, but like the value in kind of learning these tools and kind of getting comfortable with them and really kind of understanding what they offer, what they can change to your sound. And like I've been doing this I've been putting API console across all of my sessions, and just like you, I don't feel like I have to use compression on absolutely everything.
No.
But it's there the moment I'm like, oh man, like I just want to push, I need to like control this a little bit, or I want to add a little presence to it. I've got the tool right there, and then I've by using it so much, I've really gotten very intimate with like the balance between all of these different settings: the attack, the release, the knee, the feedback, the ratio. Like it just becomes like second nature to dial something in.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I've been using this particular tool more now that I have it in this console emulation integration, and I have everything I've been mixing lately. It's all in this API console. It's just, I'm kind of addicted to it. And the other thing is like that we should just emphasize and mention, is really the power of this combination of tape and console is,
Yeah.
using the tape emulation means you have to use a lot less dynamic control and a lot less saturation emulation. It's not to say that it's a full solution, but it's very powerful that way. And it's something I wanted to be sure we touched on, because we talked about this in our sort of setup call.
Mm-hmm.
You were asking me about the tape emulations and how I go about, choosing them and why. And I'm someone that's very knowledgeable about tape because I worked on, it's just like all the tape emulations, tape machine speeds, the tape formulas, the Studer, the ATR, very familiar. Made lots of records on those machines. And I spent years as an assistant setting them up and aligning them and tweaking them. So it's like I have a lot of familiarity and knowledge about these things. And I think your question the other day is like, well, how do you think about that? And really, I just click. I know what's going on, but really, I just listen and click around and find the sound that that I like.
Yeah.
And then, and that's what I would recommend, to everyone, is that, just hunt around and figure out what it is that feels right. And it's different record to record situationally. And then when you figure out the things that you maybe gravitate towards, or the things that you like that sort of fit your taste, then do a little bit of research and try to and figure out what is going on with a tape machine, educate yourself about it. Because the point that we were talking about and making to one another is that, thinking about everything scientifically, you don't have to know how to use a tape machine the way that I know how to use a tape machine for it to be an effective tool for you. It's right there in the session, available to you. Find the sound that you like. You don't have to understand why you like it. It's just that's the thing that's beautiful about this whole pursuit, is it's like, what if it sounds good, it is good, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
then
it.
and then educate yourself about, like, well, maybe why is that? Like what I mentioned before about quarter-inch tape being good for vocals. Well, why is that? Well, there's some things you can learn there, and then having that knowledge will inform your decisions. And like if I find a tape formula that I like, I find it's like, okay, I like 900 on this and +6, and I want to run it at 15 IPS, and it's close, but it's not exactly everything I think it could be. I know what I can do. I know how to, like, go into the settings, and I can tweak the bias, and I can tweak the EQ curves to kind of get it closer to what I want. And that's because I know what I'm doing under the hood. You can kind of get there too, but don't make decisions based on intellectual knowledge of the science of it, because you will not actually be able at that point. I think when we're thinking scientifically, we're not listening musically. Listen musically, and then post that decision making. Be sure you understand, if you desire to, what's going on scientifically, and then that'll help you build your understanding. And then when you, in the future, when you kind of come into a situation where it's like, I kind of want this sound, you'll have this catalog of knowledge in your mind. So it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I know where I could start to look.
Yeah.
For the answer. Does that
it's like, yeah, the next time that's where, like, it cements it in your brain of like, cool, the next time I run into something where I desire this slight difference in the tone, right? I know which thing to go to. I know try going from GP9 to the 250 tape type, or like change the elevation a little bit to change the saturation characteristic of it. Like, you start learning where your differences are, and what each of these knobs kind of, how they affect the sound, because you're totally right, man. Just these are just numbers and words attached to controls, but the end of the day is that they're affecting the sound, and they can have a massive impact across, especially something like Studio, right, where you're putting this on almost every track. This is something I really want to play for folks. I want to do a little before and after here, with and without tape, for you guys to really get a sense of just, even I'll just sold up the drums here just to make the on off nice and fairly fast here. Listen to the difference in the drum vibe when I turn off the Studer and the ATR machine that they're going into. Everything else is exactly the same. We're not changing any plugins, any settings. I'm just taking the tape off, and then we'll put it back on. And this is kind of mind blowing how huge of a difference this makes. Let's check it out. So that's without, and now with. There's a kick in there now.
Yeah. I mean, it makes things sound punchier, more glued together, more saturation. It brings out some of the ambient detail in a different way. It's kind of, it's a little bit, it's a little bit like cheating, but not, I don't know.
It's cheating. What's a good way of cheating, right? Like,
I don't know. The thing is what I love so much about what this platform is becoming is I have so many of the things that I sort of like grew up learning to record on at my fingertips again.
Yeah.
The art of engineering, record making engineering used to be, you kind of knew like what your tape machine was how it was going to transform your sound. You optimized sounds for the medium so that it would play back a certain way. It wasn't, now DAWs typically don't really have a sound, so the sound in is the sound out, and it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
And so much of the things that we are chasing in modern recording have to do with what the way we were recording decades ago. So it's super cool. The one further thing I wanted to mention about like using the Studer, like if you go back to that GUI of the expanded, really to find some usefulness out of this, there's only three things that you need to pay attention to. Is the tape formula first, because that's going to give you the biggest sonic detail change, like because they have different characteristics, and then once you then you play with the tape speed, because that's kind of almost like the sample rate. That's the resolution.
Yep.
And then the elevation or the level is how hot the signal is being printed onto the tape, which gives you your saturation. So it's like the formula is basically your sonic EQ curve. Your speed is your resolution, and then your elevation is your saturation. If you just play around with those three things and find a sound you like, that's all you need to know. You shouldn't be intimidated or feel like that you can't use this knowledgeably because it's got, because when you open it up, if you hit that open button and you get into some of the finer controls, there's not a lot in there. There's a lot if you open the ATR. I mean, there's a lot more there. But, it's just like, that's like, figure that stuff out later. It's like most of the time I don't even really change it. If I open that up and adjust something, I'm typically playing with the high frequency playback or the bias.
Yeah.
And it's just like a small little tweak. But, so I just wanted to make that point that like, really, it's just those three things. And that's how you should think about those three things is EQ curve, resolution, saturation.
That's the best way I've heard the Studer controls summed up by anybody, Jacquire. Like that, it's a great way for folks if you're learning this stuff or if you're trying to really get a handle over where do I even start with the tape machine? Because if you're like me, I have no experience using a real machine. I've only ever known the plugins. But you summed it up so nicely there of like, find your tape type, choose your resolution with your inches per second, and then get your saturation dialed in with the elevation. Yeah, it doesn't get much easier than that. And then, of course, if you do feel like you need to tweak the tone a little bit more, you can pop it open and change the bias or the high frequency reproduction. But 90% of the time, yeah, I'm with you, Jacquire. Like I just kind of like click around on these until I found, and it's not necessarily a thing, right? Where like oh, I'm making a rock song, I need to use this tape formula. It's got to be more of a like take a listen to your track and go through them. Like it's not that it doesn't take that long to click through and discover, is 250 right for this? Does it feel better with 456? Or wow, GP9 it does something and I like it, and then you keep on moving.
Absolutely, man. And the tape speeds definitely change the sonic detail too. The resolution is not just, it's not like digital resolution, because it imparts different EQ curves, which that's now we're starting to get really deep. But it's just the difference between running GP9 at 15 and 30. There's a pretty decent. I mean, you're getting a similar sort of sonic quality, but but then the shape of it changes a little bit. So it's all worth playing with.
Nice. Well, man, we could sit here and talk about drums, API, and Studer for literally hours. But I do want to highlight some other stuff inside the session as well, while we got you here, because there's so many cool things for people to discover. And the best part is, of course, like, we're not gonna be able to talk about every single track, every single little feature in here, all inside this show. But thankfully, you guys can download the session for free inside of Luna today. I saw a few people asking questions in the chat, asking how do you get to it. So just a real quick reminder: click on the UA diamond up here, and then head to the Discover tab here, and you'll find all the Luna sessions are available there. But man, what I think is, there's so many cool things to talk about here. But I do want to skip down to talking about the vocals, because people will quickly discover that there's 3 lead vocal tracks, and all 3 of them sound slightly different. What was kind of the thinking in your guys' approach to these vocal tracks? And I guess maybe before I let you speak on that, let me just play them in solo here for a second so people can hear what we're about to describe.
Oh, I came to play, keeping y'all honest, rising from the storm with the keepers of the promise, in a new direction but still trailblazing sonics. I've been in it for the longest, but just getting started. Oh, it's the fuel for the fire, a flip of the switch and we're taking it higher. Edge of your seat, down to the wire. Now get up on your feet, time to sing with the choir.
All right, so we got a lead vocal, a vocal double, and then a vocal pitch down. They're all hanging out. They're all hanging out down the center of the channel, and then there's some reverb and some micro shift and some other stuff happening here. But let's bring it back a little bit. What were you thinking about texturally for these vocals, and why would you choose to do a doubled vocal and then also add an octave vocal on top of that?
Well, it just to sort of give the double vocal is really just about giving because it's just a nice effect. It just sort of fills things out. It's a pretty tight performance, and in this particular case, just because the track is so big, and the background vocals, Amber, is pretty much, she has a vocal. There's pretty much a vocal for her happening almost the entire song. Mm-hmm. So and that's pretty layered. So, Trevor's voice just kind of needed a little bit of a similar treatment, just to have a little bit of that texture and thickening is what the double was offering. And then, the low octave provides some of a modern texture, a little bit of weight, and kind of just glue to bring the whole lead vocal sort of feel to the track. Mm-hmm. The pitched down voice there on the bottom is just a copy of the lead vocal, the one that's on top.
Got it.
And so it's just a pitched processed version of the lead vocal. Now, because sonically it's so different being pitched down, it adds up and complements the lead vocal. It's not exactly this, even though it's the same source, but because of the way it's changed, it's not going to create any like phase or just any sort of other weirdness, or create like, doubling up on the volume or adding frequencies that are too much of the same thing. It's placed in a very different spot, being an octave down.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. It's kind of crazy when you hear it with and without it, right? Because once you take it away, you're like, oh, where'd the thickness go? That's in there. It adds such a cool texture. And here, I'll play it for you guys real quick, just a quick with and without, so you can hear exactly what that's doing.
Oh, I came to play, keeping y'all honest, rising from the storm with the keepers of the promise, in a new direction but still trailblazing sonics. I've been in it for the longest, but just getting started. Oh, it's the fuel for the fire, a flip of the switch and we're taking it higher. Edge of your seat.
I mean, especially when I brought the whole mix back, right, and then just muted that one track, you're like, it's not overtaking or overshadowing anything, but it is adding this one extra layer to the onion that really cements that vocal in a cool way.
Absolutely. It adds some, it adds texture as well, but it like EQ wise, it kind of gives it a little bit more of a chesty tone, kind of helps seat it in the track. I mean, the vocals, I mean, it's a good sounding vocal without it, but it kind of just, the way that it complements is really nice. And it's like if I was having to try to EQ that sound into the lead vocal track, it might change the way my compression was behaving, and just sort of different things like that. And it's also, it might be cloudy in the reverb. Like if I was trying to get that tone out of the lead vocal, but then that's also going to the reverb and the effects, it might kind of be a little cloudier than it is. This is, it just kind of creates, a nice texture, and glues things together. And then in terms of, the guess the origin, or the way we kind of came, I had a feeling that I wanted a double vocal because of things I already mentioned, but what I ended up doing is, for the session and just sort of evaluating the track and kind of listening back and progressing things, I made a quick vocal comp of the tracking vocals, so that we would have a lead vocal to work to, before, without Trevor having to go and before he re-sang it, right?
Yeah.
And I just sort of had the thought in the midst of things that, well, I mean, it's a great performance, and it feels really good. We hadn't really put in the same effort that we put into the lead vocal, focus and attention, but it served a really good double. So I just kind of kept it, and we sang over the top of it and kind of kept it in the session. And so the lead vocal was recorded later in the day. And like I said, I comped it the next week.
That's really rad. And what's really cool, you guys will discover this when you pop this open yourself, like you'll hear the double. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how tight Trevor is to himself, just like how repeatable his performance is. But you'll hear like there's a little bit of bleed through the room, as you guys saw during the stream, right? Like they're not that far away from each other. There's just a little glass wall separating them, so you hear a little bit of bleed in there. But most importantly, the other thing I really dig about the sound that you did here, Jacquire, is like you guys will notice a lot of the processing is slightly similar between these two, right? Like you've got the Vision, and then they're both going to a Blue Stripe 1176 compressor, but the double earned itself a spring reverb. It's getting a dedicated BX20, so it's the one that's kind of feeding and giving you a little bit of that pillow, right?
Yeah, and because of the way I have the architecture set up, that reverb, I mean, there is a vocal bus that these things are going to, but that reverb is like, so the reverb that's being sent off the main voice is not going through the vocal bus. It should be going to or is it? I can't.
It is. Yeah, the 224.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's also
it is.
going
Okay.
into Trevor's subgroup.
So but it's independent. It's a little bit independent of the way the double vocals reverb is, and it's a completely different sounding reverb. So it just fills it out and kind of combines differently. And I put it on the track so that so things like sending it to the micro pitch shift, the reverb is also going to the micro pitch shift.
Yeah. Which
so
that's what it's super cool. Like here, let me I'll just play that double for you guys here real quick and just kick that BX20 on and off so you can hear what that's doing.
Oh, I came to play, keeping y'all honest, rising from the storm with the keepers of the promise, in a new direction, but still trailblazing sonics. I've been in there for the longest, but just getting started. Oh, it's the fuel for the fire, a flip of the switch, and we're taking it higher. Edge of your seat.
It's that length between the phrases that this is now. It's not an obvious like, oh wow, I'm hearing a ton of spring reverb. It's this like glue between the phrases that to me it seems to work super duper well for this vocal mix.
Well, another point I'd like to make is that there's a pretty generous amount of reverb on the double vocal, and because of that, I'm not using as much reverb on the lead vocal. So the lead vocal that is louder, it not only is it drier, it is drier, so it allows it to stay more focused and forward and not get washy. But the double vocal is providing some of the bigger ambient gesture, but there, because it's not tied to that lead vocal, and the performances are really close, but they're slightly different. It just kind of helps with the dimension and the presentation and the depth of the vocals in the mix.
Mm-hmm. And something I was curious about just before we went on air, but I want to share with folks as well, is like I noticed I mentioned everything is kind of kept right in the center here.
Yeah.
For me, personally, like kind of my default is like, oh, I see doubles or I see octaves, I immediately want to start spreading stuff out across the stereo field. What was kind of your reasoning for keeping these focused in this mix?
Well, it's a couple things. I mean, part of it is the ambience we were just talking about, and then also using the micro pitch shift. Those things widen the center a little bit for the lead vocal,
Mm-hmm.
but Amber's voice participating so much in the song,
Mm-hmm.
and being wider. It's just like that. That's really that width, that sort of medium width that her voice is occupying. I'm kind of keeping Trevor a little bit more in the middle focus and her around it, as opposed to kind of trying to spread them both out. I wouldn't. Trevor's voice, by keeping it in the middle, stacked up the way that it is, it maintains more focus this
Yeah,
way.
that's really
And the width is just not as wide. Now, in the case where I've, in a case on a different production, different song, where there hasn't been as much background vocal stacks and participation. Yeah, I mean, I would typically do something like what you're describing, Ben, like your sort of default. And sometimes I've even done it to where I'll take, it can be really interesting, especially with a performance of a lead and a double that is this tight.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost make them equal volume and spread them out really wide, and it can be very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I associate that with the Elliott Smith and Bon Iver sort of records, right? Where you're getting
Totally.
strong doubles opened up, so that way there's almost nothing. What's happening in the middle is this whole different character, and you're getting almost two sides of the mirror sonically. Let me play for folks here. This is now the lead vocal plus Amber's vocals, because I love that you brought that up, Jacquire. Like, Amber's basically in on almost every line of the song. So that adding the stereo interest on top of harmony and octaves that she does is really fun to hear. So let me play that back here over the verse.
Oh, I came to play, keeping y'all honest, rising from the storm with the keepers of the promise, in a new direction, but still trailblazing sonics. I've been in it for the longest, but just getting started. Oh, it's the fuel for.
It's so cool. I love the way she kind of dances in and out of stuff, and like it's octaves, and then boom, it's a harmony stack, and then back to octave. Like
much credit to her. She did an awesome job arranging her voice, her vocals. Definitely did a great thing. And there was a lyric change, and that's what the tracks are at the very bottom, where what she delivered prior to our session, in sort of working to the demo as Moon Taxi was sort of initially putting the song together. Her vocals are stacked up in stereo stems, and so when we changed the lyric, we had to re-record her voice, and so that's why we have so many stacks down there at the bottom in those two particular spots, because of the lyric change.
Yeah, and it's cool. We were talking about this earlier, and there's another great example of this in the session too. Of like, I know some people get really hung up on having to make everything match for a vocal, right? Or for a bass or some other instrument, like making sure the signal chains are exactly the same. Preamp, like making everything perfect for a punch in. When we were talking about this earlier, like, end of the day, it kind of creates a cooler moment to have them be slightly different, right? Like when we're just listening back there isolated, like it gets to this one moment, it punches slightly differently. It doesn't wildly change. Like, it doesn't feel like we just departed and now there's a new singer that you've never heard of before. No, it's still the same voice, it's still the same timbre, but now it's got a slightly different presence to it, a slightly different polish that actually makes that a little bit more of a moment. And I know you kind of did a similar thing on the bass tracks here at the very beginning of the session. There's a track that only plays for the intro, and then the other bass kind of takes over for the rest of the song. That's kind of the same idea there, right? Of like have something special for that intro moment, and then you don't have to revisit it every time that part comes in.
Absolutely, and we can listen to that. We can listen to the sonic change, but you don't notice it. You don't notice the transition in the song. And the reason so Busby, who is a co-writer on this song, who's no longer with us, and Busby was a friend of mine for more than 20 years. He played the original bass on the demo that they did together before the song was complete. Then the band went on and completed the song lyrically and musically after the writing session. But just in thinking about it and talking about it, Tommy did a great job playing the song, obviously, but keeping that opening bass line of Busby's was just sort of felt like, well, I mean, yeah, his spirit and contribution is certainly part of this, but that really felt like the moment where we could kind of keep his music, like his playing contribution in the song, and it was just like a great opportunity to do that, and then but you don't really when you solo them up, and as you guys download and check this session out, you'll definitely hear that they're, I mean, different player, different bass, different everything. But it works, it works really good. So it was just kind of like, this is sort of a tip of the hat to Busby, and just kind of keeping a little bit more of his contribution and spirit in the song production.
Yeah, let's take a listen to that. I solo the bass, drums, and the percussion, because it's gonna lead me into my next line of questioning about this production. I can't get over how cool the drums, the rhythm section of the song, how vibey like it is. And a couple of things to really highlight here is like, you've done a similar thing on the snare sample, which again has a BX20 dedicated to it. But another one that I had this weird mental block of, I never put reverbs on basses typically until I started hanging out with folks like you, who are like, dude, who cares, like it sounds cool, right? And this is a perfect example of that bass sounds so rad, and having this little bit of spring reverb on it, it's not making it washy, it's just adding like a textural thing to it, right?
Absolutely. And because and it also adds a little bit of width to it. Instead of it just being like dead smack in the middle, it kind of like spreads it out a little bit. And in the past, sometimes I've put like really short delays on bass tracks as an effect, not necessarily. In this case, I put it right on the track, but a lot of times in the past with like a little tiny bit of delay, it's like in parallel, like more of a traditional effects send return type of path, like used to do that a lot. Used to do that a lot more than I do now, because it just, the depth of other DAWs, 10, 15 years ago, just didn't really have as much, depth in the sound field. And so just having a bass just like smack dab in the middle just didn't really have that, didn't fill the space in the way that I wanted it to. And the other thing is like, the other thing about digital recording that we miss about recording and printing mixes to analog tape machines, there's crosstalk. There's crosstalk, and there's a little bit of wow and flutter, and these kind of things make the center of the stereo image on a tape machine playback kind of like shimmers and wiggles around, shimmies and shakes, and it kind of creates a thicker middle, which we don't have in a digital platform. So so these are some tricks that I mean, that I just sort of adopted along the way. I'm not the only person to put, effects on bass, but it really works very effectively here. And and honestly, the inspiration for it was kind of what Busby's sound, because it already has a tiny taste of it on there, sort of
Ah,
built in. I'm pretty sure if we listen
yeah.
to that soloed up again.
Yep.
Just it's
You
so
hear,
so slight.
You hear it's almost like, it sounds like a little bit of like a room, or it's just got it's got a little bit of wall behind it, right?
Hmm.
And then and then once you get to the verse, here's just the bass by itself.
It just adds a little bit of color and depth to it.
Yeah, dude, I love that. And yeah, so anyone else out there that was like me, who was like you're thinking that you weren't allowed to put reverb on bass for far too long, this is your permission. Jacquire just wrote your permission slip that you are allowed to put reverb on bass whenever you feel like it, or whenever it sounds good.
Please do. Well, the other thing is that when people used to record in rooms together where there was like spill and leakage and a loud bass amp next to the drums, you were getting an ambient bass picture a little bit through the drums anyway.
True.
So I'm kind of faking some, what would happen on other mics on other instruments in the room that was also hearing just a taste of the bass.
Totally. And so yeah, like I said, the percussion, like when you look at the whole session, I think it's a battle between guitars and percussion for who actually takes up the most amount of tracks.
Mhm.
I love the arrangement though of these percussion bits, and it's a mixture of, it sounds like it's a mixture of some recorded stuff, a lot of program stuff, but this is what really, I think, in a lot of productions kind of sets apart the quote unquote like the demo sounding, or like a rough kind of feel, to something that's a little bit more produced and polished, is like giving these little rhythmic variations and moments. And it helps, actually, you guys will notice things come in at certain parts of the song and then they're out and then they join back in. It helps shape the difference between your verse and your chorus, right? Adding the energy of bringing in a different hat loop or another sample hit or snaps, like bringing in these little elements to really define a section. Any tips that you have for folks at home who are trying to kind of elevate their productions, and how can they do that with percussion?
Well, I think the way to maybe approach it is get a work tape, a working sort of just scratch version of the demo, the song, even if it's just a one microphone recording.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you record it to click, maybe you don't. Maybe if you don't record it to click and you want to add some programming, you're going to have to sort of put it on a grid, a little bit, and then sort of before you get to recording more of the final elements, drums or whatever, do a little bit of initial programming. Add some things that sort of think in reverse. Sort of think about like what will the chorus maybe need a little bit of tambourine, or will the bridge want some snaps? Maybe the second verse wants some snaps. Where could claps be? Just sort of do that. I've done that a lot in the past, and Spencer has helped me quite often with some of that stuff, is like take the demo, kind of flush it out a little bit with some programming, and then you have that stuff to build on, and rearrange as you go. The way it happened kind of with this song is because this sort of started with like I said, between Moon Taxi and Busby, as a sort of a writing session, before like the band actually, they all contributed to the writing, but they weren't playing as a sort of like, so they were building a track. And so a decent amount of this percussion and programming and stuff was sort of part of building the track. I think there was a drum, if I remember correctly, there was a drum loop also that they were working with,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously we pulled that out, as soon as we made the decision to do the song in this way, we'll pull that out because we're going to record real drums, right?
Yeah.
But sort of starting to build that stuff up. You don't have to keep it all. I mean, a lot of times the pre-production programming that gets done from in my world, you end up maybe only keeping 60% of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just nice to have those things to play off of and build off of, and then record more as you go. But it's a nice start to think about it that way. Now if it's a little bit challenging or it's not an easy situation, you don't have to overdo it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here, and then you kind of can do more post after the fact. Like we recorded, there's some program claps in there, but then we as a group recorded more claps over top of it to kind of give it to be able to capture the ambience, to give it a human feel, and just sort of add a different texture to it, so that in the last part of the song where the claps, we want the feeling to kind of come up in it to feel more of like a kind of a clap along part.
Yeah.
Added the human element and added an extra layer of that texture, as opposed to it being like a static sample. Kind of give it a little bit more depth and liveliness.
Well, and I love you can see the humanness right here in the waveforms, guys. Right, you can see
Totally.
the flam, but like that's the beauty of that's something you can't necessarily get from a sample unless you really overdo it in terms of like swapping samples and flapping them around a little bit. Like it's almost far easier to do what you guys did of like everybody jump out into the live room. We're gonna do a couple of takes of claps real quick to add a human element to it. And here let me play what the percussion blend is like here for the final chorus.
See what I see. I'm running with the rhythm. Could be my backbeat, or be my backbeat. Oh, you got me on a mission. Come on and find me. Come on.
It's such a cool element. As you guys saw, I was muting the whole percussion bus. I was kind of taking it in and out there, so you guys could really feel what the impact that's having to the mix and the production. And like, it's one of the it's definitely these are all those sorts of layers that like when you listen back to it as a listener, you're not going to be able to point out, oh, I hear the claps or I hear this particular element, but you do feel the energy and the liveliness that these are all adding. Because when you take it away, you're like, what happened? Where'd it all go? Like, what's going on? I was happy, and now I'm not. I'm still kind of happy, but I'm less happy than I was before. What changed?
I would say, just in doing things like that, we're adding the performed clap. It's, if there's one where sometimes where they're too tight or that's too flammy, and just listening. I mean, I don't know how you would look at that and judge what the right way to edit it is, right? You just have to listen. And like, if it doesn't pop out, that means maybe it's too tight, or if it kind of feels too far off, the feel, then you just grab a clap that you like the sound of and put it in and replace the one that wasn't. And that's as much as you should think about the editing, and in terms of something like that. I think
Totally.
we got to just be careful to not use our eyes too much, only as a reference for what our ears are telling us.
Mm-hmm. That is absolutely key. Well, Jacquire, I want to get around to one more thing before we sign off and let people grab the session on their own, and that is I want to look at the mix bus a little bit here. I saw someone earlier asking about using the 2500 and just in general what your mix bus process is kind of looking like. So for this one, a row that we haven't really gotten a chance to look at a bunch here because it's assumed that it's on there, is you've got the API summing on all of your buses. And it looks like pretty much all these they're just set at the default settings, right? Like you didn't have to go in and tweak the headroom controls or trim.
I did not. Nope. I like the way I like the way it sounds.
Yeah.
Actually, honestly, I've probably mixed 30 songs since this was introduced.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of one time where I've manipulated the gain structure of it. I just like the way it is, but it's there if it's there if you need it.
Yep, it's
want
there
it.
if you mess up and you push into it a little too hard. Like there's always multiple solutions, but yeah, you can go and just open up the headroom, or you can crunch it down a little bit more. So you've got API summoning across all the buses, and then it's coming here onto your main fader. So I'll just kind of quickly pull up your mix bus path here. So it starts off with the curve bender EQ. And you sir, you're being subtle. You got little half dBs, a little half dB at 91, a half dB at 2.8, and a half dB at 16. So are you using this not just for? I assume this isn't just like I want little lifts here and there, but it's a curve bender, right? It actually has a little bit of a tone inherently to it.
Definitely has a tone. I'm using the high pass on it as well. I would think. But
Yep,
yeah,
you got that at like 20.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's color, and then just a little bit of general sort of EQ shape, Nothing too heavy lifting. I tend to use an EQ at the front of my mix bus processing. A lot of times I use the curve bender because I love the tone of it, and the EQ points are in a great spot. I mean, a curve bender was designed originally as a mastering EQ, so it's same as a Pultec. It is for general musical shaping. So the EQ points are in good spots, and it's just kind of a little bit of shaping, cleaning the bottom end up, and just a little bit slight smiley face accentuation, and that probably feeds into the 2500.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so 2500. This is this is also you're running the DSP version of it here, but in theory you could also be running the console emulation version of it.
Absolutely. But in that way I couldn't put the curve bender in front of it.
Yep, exactly.
So that's the reason. Yes, that's totally true. And the 2500 is available on all the buses in this console emulation. But the reason that I'm doing it where it is because I want the curve bender EQ before it.
Yeah, so that way you're hitting the compressor with the EQ move already in place.
Yeah, and I mean there is a side chain where you can relieve how the compressor is really reacting to the low frequency. The subs, but I'm wanting to do that before it even arrives at the compressor.
Gotcha. And so yeah, like for anyone who's not familiar with the 2500, how for mix bus is this kind of your go-to setup in terms of like medium slow release, a 2-to-1 ratio, medium slow attack, 2-to-1 ratio, fast release, kind of like a medium loud new feedback.
Yeah, I mean that's all very in line with the way I would set up any mix bus compressor. It's mix bus processing is now I do often use the curve bender. I do often use the Pultec. That's more often on those because those are just very musical EQ shapes that were originally designed to kind of as mastering type EQs, or like overall equalization on music. Not tracks of music, but like a mix of music.
Yeah.
Mix bus compression. It's like I'm always auditioning all different kinds of things. Now, I was trying to give this thing a full test run. I pulled up the 2500 and set it how I would normally set it when I use it, and which is generally reflects how I would use any mix bus compressor. And it sounded phenomenal. So I stuck with it. So yeah, but that's a pretty typical setup. I think the threshold is probably all the way up.
Yeah. I think it's like one tick down from all the way up.
Oh, okay. Pretty close. Yeah. Now the reason I do that is and I do that most of the time with a mix bus compressor is like the threshold all the way up or nearly all the way up, so I can get as much possible level into it before it starts doing its job. Because I'm using it with a 2-to-1 ratio and a fast release, I'm just using it as a little bit, just touching it, just a little bit of glue control. So, but I want to get as much level into it before it starts doing that job for me,
Yeah.
so that I can get my loudness up where I need and want it to be.
Yeah, that's it. I know some people, they struggle with these, like, where to gain stage stuff into it, right? Like, and I know sometimes I think like the default might be back here at 0 for the threshold. It can sometimes by default be hitting way too hard, and then if you're me, sometimes you freak out. You're like, oh man, like I got to go back and rebalance my entire mix. It's like, no, actually, like I'm with you, Jacquire. Like a lot of times I'll pull this all the way up to the top and then to slowly work it back down until it starts giving me just a little bit of movement.
Little love.
Just a little bit of love, a little tap, a little do. But this one here, let me play the chorus for you guys. I'll just kick this in and out, so you guys can hear what the 2500 is doing for the mix. We'll leave the EQs and everything else in place. This is just the 2500 coming in and out on that last chorus.
Come on and find me. I'm looking for a vision. Come see what I see. I'm running with the rhythm. Come be my backbeat. I'll be my backbeat. Oh, you got me on a mission. Come on and find me.
It's such a cool color, right? Like
Absolutely.
It's a
The way
little
it
bit
controls the mid range. Yeah, absolutely.
That's instantly what I heard was like mid-range control, and like it's not a super bright compressor, right? It's not radically changing the tone, but it is just kind of tightening things up in a really beautiful way.
Well, the other really slick thing about using a 2500 is that you have the shapes of the knee. And and the thrust control and the sort of the style, the thrust control being like the loud, medium, and normal, I guess is and then you sort of have new versus old, which is like feed forward, feedback type of compression, so it that tone, I mean, just that tone selection alone makes it like an MVP mix bus compressor. Because of what you can do just right there. The compressor settings aside, that is a huge tool. And then it also has a link function, like how much of the stereo left and right, how in unison they are, like how are they working together? Because sometimes you might want to give them a little bit more independence. Like most stereo compressors, you don't have that option,
Oh, totally. So it's a very unique feature to the 2500, and I totally agree. Like this is one of the controls I have the most fun playing with on the 2500, right? Because it can really dramatically change your width of the mix and how that feels and how it bounces around, and and again, hopefully you guys are all picking up not only. Want to give you guys a lot of fun ideas and things to explore, but the most important thing to do is to get these sessions, download them for yourself, and then come in here and play around with the 2500, because this is by far the best material to be learning and kind of getting your head and your ears in tune with what's on offer here. You're starting from Jacquire settings, and then you're able to come in here and really get a sense for yourself. What is that thrust doing? Do I like it on loud? Do I like it better on medium or normal? Like the only way to learn these things is by getting in there, listening for yourself, and kind of tweaking these settings and finding what they have to offer. So that way, when it comes time to do it on your own mix, you're like, oh yeah, no, this thing it's doing this right now. I want to do something else. Where do I go to find that control? Oh yeah, here it is. I remember the 2500. Open up the sidechain link. Boom, now my thing's a little bit wider and it's moving a little bit more dynamically left to right. I love it.
Well, and I would just sort of say that, I think, people love to see, other people's presets and kind of like get into their mind a little bit. And now I just want to be sure to just sort of state that the settings we're looking at here generally work for me, and this is generally where I end up, but it has a lot to do with all of the decisions I made kind of preceding it. You're not gonna put the same EQ curve or same compressor setting on different source material treated differently and get a desired result. This works for me in this way because of all of the cumulative choices I make, and this sort of being a final stage. It now, and then you may, you may listen to this and want to make a different choice, and that's good. I mean, that's okay. This
Mhm.
this I mean, I would say that this works really well. It sounds good to me. I think we arguably say it sounds pretty good, but it's not. There isn't just one way, and these settings aren't any sort of absolute. But what I love about the opportunity to share this stuff is that it at least gives you like something that's put together well, and that there's a way to do some exploration like Ben's talking about and get a feel for these things.
Mhm.
And then sort of make it your own. Make it your own. It's like if I had maybe used a different style or different approach to the way I was maybe compressing the drums and balancing things and combining things and where I was pushing EQ points and so forth and so on, I'd probably be in a different spot on the way I maybe was setting up this tone selection on the compressed the 2500 here. So,
Mhm.
while these are good things and they're good settings, they're not absolutes. And so, please feel like your choices are good choices too, and just use this as an opportunity to experiment and inform yourself.
Nice. I love that, man. Couple last little wrap up questions here. Pultec, this is we've seen these sorts of moves from you before. A little bit
Mhm.
of high frequency boost, and then the boost and the cut on like you're doing it here at 20. This is one of those things. This box, the Pultec, just it's something magic about the top and the bottom, right? For what it can
Oh,
do.
absolutely.
And across
It
it,
is the smiley face EQ of the last how many decades? I mean,
exactly.
it's like
Yep.
it is the thing that, we have to also realize that our brains and mind and appreciation for music and what sounds like a pro record or not a pro record, not to say that you have to use a Pultec for it to sound like a pro record, but the thumbprint and the sonic impression that it has left on music, the contribution that is made, the shape of the EQ, where it and how it EQs, it has become part of our record making consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So using these tools, not to say that you have to use them, because there's a thousand ways to do this, and that's what I was just kind of talking about a second ago. Is it's like, but it feels right to me the way I put things together. It's like I've been doing this for decades, so the way I put things together, a Pultec is just kind of a suitable choice in the end to
Mm-hmm.
EQ. Now it may not work for some things, certainly, and I don't use it all the time. It's not always the choice,
Mm-hmm.
but it is it's a fast track to get to that smiley face EQ for sure. And the way that the way that it opens up the top end and the way that it twists the bottom end into shape, like same frequency selection, and I'm just kind of working the attenuation against the boost. It kind of it kind of is giving me, it's carving away stuff below 20, but it's also kind of pushing it up. So I got a little bit of a bump there. It
Mm-hmm.
just kind of creates a unique shape. If you
Nice.
want to, thing is, if you want to inform yourself, so what I would say is put an EQ, like when you get this session, download the session, add an EQ to the very end of my mix bus chain and turn the Pultec on and off. Play with the settings.
Mm-hmm.
And you will also have the visual. If you put on an EQ that has like a spectral analysis
Mm-hmm.
that shows you what's going on with the frequencies, you can kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about when I'm saying it kind of twists the bottom end into this cool thing. And like how does it when it is it set to 16K on the top?
It's on 12K.
12K, okay. It's like, yeah, I'm boosting at 12K, but you can observe like how far down does that 12K shelf reach? I mean, it's probably reaching down as much as it's very subtle, but down as far as 5K maybe,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, because it's a gradual shelf, so you're
Yeah.
not just turning up 12K, you're turning up everything around it. And how is
Uh-huh.
it turning it up?
Like,
So, and like the broadness of the what is that called?
Call
What
it
is
the
that
bandwidth
parameter?
knob.
Yeah, yeah. The sharp, like how sharp, or what's the sharp to what is it?
Sharp to broad.
Broad. Yeah, yeah. So it's like, that's like it's these are things that you can observe while you're listening.
Let me let's give folks here a little audio reference. I'll kick the Pultec on and off again, leaving everything else exactly the same. This should just hopefully at home. You guys are gonna see me do it. You're just gonna see the smile come to my face as I kick this on and off.
Come on and find me. I'm looking for a vision. Come see what I see. I'm running with the rhythm. Come be my backbeat. I'll be my backbeat. Oh, you got me.
Great, dude. I mean, it's again cymbals, kick and bass. It's the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
And then, but it's also it's a bit of a dimension thing. I hear, like
Absolutely.
I hear the whole mix. It's almost like it's taking one step forward, and and this is why guys like what Jacquire was saying of like, yeah, you can look at these things, you can analyze them, but like end of the day, when you kind of close your eyes and listen to what it's doing, it's more than just a boost here, a cut here, a boost there. Like it is not just those things. There's other harmonic things happening in the way, because when you're using the Pultec emulation like this, you've got tubes, transformers, inductors. It's passing through. It's even if you were to set all the knobs at 0 and I did the same thing, there would still be that slight difference in the tone and the sound. And that's the faithfulness of these emulations. It's modeling every component of these circuits. It's passing through every part of those circuits, and it's imparting not just this like smiley face curve. It's doing something else that was just inherent to running mixes through real life Pultecs.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think one point I'd like to make to everyone is that when I start a mix, I get a balance. And before I start going in there and, tweaking individual sounds and EQing geeking out on what the kick drum EQ is, it's like I get a balance. I put, because when we turn these things on and off, you're hearing a big difference, and it's the way that everything is being brought together and glued together. Now, I'm not saying that I set up my mix bus first. Like I get a balance and then I set up my mix bus and I start to pick the things that I think I want to use, and I kind of get them roughed in. It's not to say that once I've set them, I forget them. I would go back there and I revise and I review, and because it's like maybe the broadness of the boost in the top end on the Pultec is too broad or not broad enough, or it's maybe picking up too much 5K, so I sharpen it a little bit, or just make all these subtle changes. But if some of the first things I do is I pick a tape formula on the Studer if I'm going to use it, right? And I set up my mix bus EQ and I get that balance going. And it's just like so much of the work gets done by making those big broad choices and processes first. And then you go and worry about filling in the cracks and carving things out and making the specifics of how things fit together. But this is, this is an important, I feel like it's an important point to make that, Ben is demonstrating to you how much change happens when you turn off the tape, or you turn off the Pultec. These are the places that you should start to work on a mix, work from the top down, I guess, or however you want to say it.
Well, and it's funny you picked up on that. Yeah, everything that we've kind of auditioned and really focused on today, they were kind of like your first moves. They were kind of your big broad strokes that applied to the entire session. The tape, the summing, the mix bus, like these moves, these were the ones that you probably, like you said, you did these first, and then you start going in and doing the details of everything else. But like that's why I love kind of seeing and investigating these aspects of the mix, because these are the big broad strokes that you make that kind of define what happens next and where the mix kind of builds and leads to. But it also, like, I use the same sort of process that you're doing here. This results in me having to do less processing on individual tracks. Like I'm not having to go in and constantly EQ every single track individually, because I'm already liking how they sound. And now it's more of a blend. It's a lot more mixing with the faders than it is trying to mix in the inserts all the time.
Absolutely. I feel like for me, the more individual EQ I have to do, the less the whole thing hangs together.
Yep.
And, and the the way the mix bus kind of brings everything together informs the way that, that I would set up the drum parallel compression.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's like, because that's what's feeding into the mix bus. So it's like I might, like if I started with my drums and set up this like awesome sounding parallel compression and got all that kicking, it's like, then I'm having to tailor make the mix bus to that, and it should be the other way around.
Yeah.
It's because really all the drums are just an element of the mix. They are not the entire mix. So I feel like you should address treating the whole thing first, and then kind of go back and address the smaller parts of it, the inner workings. Because like Ben said, you end up having to do a lot less if you approach it that way, guaranteed.
Yeah, and it's evidenced by when you guys pull in the session, you'll see like most tracks, everything's got division on it for the most part, but everything else, it's like maybe one or two things here or there. Like talk about vocal compression, right? There's like a couple 1176s on the lead. They've got a 160 on the bus, and that's about it. For Amber, you've got the SSL channel, the raw, a little bit of spring. Like the amount that you've had to process on any individual channel, let alone the groups, it's very minimal, and it's really inspiring to see how you can make something sound so polished, so big, so energetic and lively, without having to overdo anything at any stage of the process. And that it really is. If you guys are taking away one thing from checking out the session, from hearing us, from hearing me pick Jacquire's brain about this, I hope you guys walk away with that kind of mode of like, start with some big strokes, start with your, get your tape emulation, get your summon, get your mix bus, kind of get yourself in a good spot to where it feels good without having to like get the microscope out, and then start zooming in and finding the aspects of it that you do want to tweak or you want to add or subtract from. It's really great, man. And Jacquire, this is such a great workflow to be able to share with folks. On top of all the little tips and tricks that we've gotten here along the way. Yeah, anything else inside the session that you wanted us to highlight before we set people on their way?
No, I don't think so. I just on the back of what you were just saying, I would just remind, and we already mentioned it, but I just remind everybody that you can go and you can look at the record paths too. So so you can kind of see what work was done on the way in and maybe why some things weren't really touched too much in the, like with mixing EQ or processing, because some of that work was done. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do it the same way, but you can do some of that stuff in post, but just kind of it's awesome that you can see that detail in this. You can kind of go back, and it's not just like a mystery, like, okay, well that part sounds the way it sounds, but there's no processing in the mix to it. Well, you can kind of go get a clue at actually some more information on what happened. I'll just remind you of that.
That's a really good point, because you committed a lot of these sounds with processing, with like we examined like that kick drum, the kick in mic, it already had a lot of EQ going on into it, which again made your mixing process that much easier, to where you've only got one little move on the EQ for the kick track, because on the way in you did the heavy lifting and you got it kind of sorted out at the tracking, so that way the musicians were hearing the effect, you were hearing the effect, like everything was kind of in place. And it's a decision made, committed to, printed into the session. You never have to think about it again, and then you can just keep on moving forward, which is a big theme in all of your productions that I've seen. Is like you're keeping the session moving forward. You're progressing from the tracking stage into the mixing stage to really kind of finishing this stuff so efficiently and effectively, and that's really unlocked by being able to commit to stuff like that in real time, which is just, it's super fun to see how it happens in real time, but then most importantly to be able to hear the results of that after the fact.
100%. Ben, I just want to I want to thank you and Universal Audio. I want to thank Moon Taxi.
Yes.
Remember Busby, and just Sound Emporium, just everything that went into this. It's I'm always grateful and honored to be part of these, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud of it. I'm glad the song is out. Hope people enjoy it. And it's, big thanks. Shout out to you.
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much, Jacquire, and likewise, man. I have so much fun doing these shows with you. I love hanging out with you, but I learn so much every time we get to hang out together, and it's really fun being able to share this with everybody else as well. Like, it's the sharing of knowledge and inspiration here that I think is so key. It gets people excited to go try these ideas out, to bring some of the little tips and tricks that we've kind of exposed along the way to make their mixes and their productions and their recording sessions that much more fun and enjoyable to do. So yeah, dude, Jacquire, thank you so much, man. It takes a lot to really do something like this. That's as ambitious as this, and you're always down to do it with us. And both me and Universal, we appreciate you so much for doing this. And
it's a love fest, man. It's a good thing. The technology that's being created, the opportunities. It's this what this Luna platform is becoming. It gives me all the convenience of what modern recording is, but also gives me back all the things that I have had to work hard for in the last handful of years as we've gotten away from a more traditional studio environment, and there hasn't been as much budget available. The spaces aren't there. The maintenance, the equipment is aging. Just all these things. It's just like it's bringing all of the technology and ability kind of back into one unique new place that is just. It's just super powerful. It's just super, super powerful, and it's given me back things that I have missed and not been able to do for a long time, especially as expediently and conveniently, so that I can work at the speed of creativity and not be weighed down by a heavy process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jacquire, man, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. Thank you, everybody at home, for tuning in. You guys had such great questions as well along the way. So if you haven't already, make sure you guys are downloading the session, checking it out for yourselves. Feel free to post comments on the video down below. We'll keep an eye on it and answer any further questions that you guys have along the way. And yeah, guys, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll be back again here very soon. Later.